she's a wonderful woman. I think she's a powerful force of good and positive energy.
But you ain't no Elon.
But she also brought us Dr. Oz and The Secret. We have to remember what this lady has done.
She has to be held accountable.
I forgive her, but I mean, cut the shit. The Secret is a particularly egregious offense.
What, you just...
Oh, you don't believe?
You don't believe?
Oh, believe? Believe?
I want to be rich. I am rich.
I imagine myself flying. I can fly. I will beat my wings until I take off.
For decades, one name was synonymous with wisdom, empathy, and a free car: Oprah Winfrey. She was more than a host. She was America's conscience, a figure so trusted that her approval could create millionaires overnight. But what if the Queen of Talk was also the queen of something far more manipulative? Recently, commentators like Joe Rogan and Megyn Kelly have been pulling back the curtain, not just questioning her legacy, but putting it on trial. They suggest that behind the soft lighting and tearful confessions lies a calculated empire built on pseudoscience, hypocrisy, and masterful propaganda. The story they tell is one of a beloved icon's stunning fall from grace, and it's far more shocking than any daytime TV confession.
Love Oprah, like most of us who grew up when we did. And only now did I realize I've been getting spoon-fed propaganda from this woman for years. I always took her little setup packages as gospel. You know, before I was a reporter, I never even thought to question whether Oprah might be intentionally misleading me. Then last night, the dawn came, and I was like, oh my God, she is not a reporter, she's a propagandist.
Joe Rogan is calling out Oprah and Michelle Obama for hypocritical speeches at the DNC Watch.
She's up there talking about income inequality. Like, hey, lady.
Yeah, I know.
You're rich as Like, how is that equal? And also, when Michelle Obama was saying, you know, I think she was saying her mother or grandmother was always suspicious of people who took more than they needed.
Yes.
Like, you are worth so much money.
Take more than they need. The Obamas have 4 mansions.
I mean, it's a bunch of rich people talking about rich people.
It wasn't always this way. To understand the controversy, you have to remember the golden age of Oprah. She exploded onto the national scene from Chicago, a force of genuine, raw authenticity. She was open about her struggles with weight and her difficult past. This wasn't some polished, untouchable celebrity. This was a real person, and America fell in love. Her show became a cultural phenomenon because it felt like a conversation with a trusted friend. She was the moral compass, the nation's top-tier emotional GPS. But as her power grew to unimaginable heights, a subtle shift began. The relatable friend started to become more of a guru, and the advice she was selling was about to get very strange and very, very profitable.
It was one of the more I want to say disturbing, but it was confusing when that was taking hold with people. When I had friends that were telling me that The Secret is real and that they imagined they were going to fulfill these childhood dreams that they had about whatever, being a fucking astronaut, whatever it would be. There's a couple people that I knew that were trying to tell me that The Secret was going to be the thing and that they had a vision board and they had photographs. They put pictures up of the things that they wanted. Like them in front of large crowds and shit. And I'm like, oh boy. Did you see the Oprah interview?
No.
She's off the rails.
Yeah,
Off the rails.
I heard about it.
Into fucking wine mom country again.
Wow.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If somebody breaks in my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that.
Tim Dillon is the best. Tim Dillon's like, she's saying gypsy curses. What is she saying?
When was the last time Oprah actually spent time hanging out with a working class person in America? She's on her Montecito estate with one of the most beautiful mansions known to man. And that is why she did not follow up with Kamala Harris in response to that stupid gun question with, well, you're on camera saying that you favor mandatory gun buybacks. So how would that work? The Oprah enthusiasm worked when it was genuine.
The first major crack in the flawless facade appeared with a single book, The Secret. Oprah championed it, calling its message life-changing. The book's premise was simple. If you just think positively enough, the universe will give you anything you want. Want to be rich? Just imagine it. Want to cure a terminal illness? Just vibe higher. But critics were horrified. Joe Rogan called it dangerous hocus pocus, pointing out the insanity of telling people with real-world problems that their suffering was their own fault for not thinking positively enough. At 50 years old and a billionaire, how did Oprah not see that this was a scam? To sell this fantasy to over 20 million people wasn't just irresponsible. It was a high-functioning con game with glitter. And what happened next would prove this wasn't a one-off mistake.
Yeah, so let's think of when The Secret came out. I want to say that was like 2006-ish.
2004.
2006.
Nice.
Okay. So 12 years ago, she was 50 years old. How the fuck do you not know when you're 50 years old and worth $1 billion that that's not how it works?
That it's hocus pocus.
Yeah, it's not hocus pocus.
Yeah.
And to sell that to people is crazy. And that's a book that sold, I think I was reading it sold somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 million copies.
Wow.
Is that what it says? Yeah.
Jeez.
That's
Of whatever she believes, not what's real. So you remember she did that like kind of factual interview after the quote documentary of Michael Jackson?
Yes.
That was so dishonest.
Yes.
She did not raise any of those accusers' serious compromising facts when she had them right there. Maybe they're telling the truth, maybe they're not. But as a journalist, you have to at least ask. You know, you've got multiple lawsuits against his estate, sir. Might that be an incentive to lie? Didn't ask.
After popularizing a book, Oprah moved on to popularizing people. She launched the careers of two of the most controversial figures in television history, Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil. She handpicked them, polished their images, and gave them her golden stamp of approval. Dr. Phil became a couch therapist, famous for yelling at troubled teenagers on national TV, a format many saw as exploitative entertainment disguised as help. But Dr. Oz was her Franken-scientist. She promoted him as a trusted medical expert, but he went on to recommend miracle weight loss cures like raspberry ketones that were later exposed as total nonsense. He became a sentient Whole Foods aisle, a walking advertisement for pseudoscience. For critics, Oprah wasn't just platforming bad ideas anymore. She was building a factory that produced them, and she never took responsibility for the monsters she created.
You've got these accusations against him. You had a book that you were supposed to produce about Michael Jackson in the context of litigation where you were required to turn this stuff over, and you lied saying that you didn't have it. And you only got found out because Random House and these other publishers admitted you shopped it to them and turned over the metadata to Michael Jackson's estate. This guy, my point is simply, this one accuser was very compromised, and she had him right after the documentary. It aired on HBO right after. Didn't ask a question. Then she gets Meghan Markle. That was another propaganda fest. My point is coming from the other way. She had the accusers there, and the accusers may or may not have had this experience with Michael Jackson.
Oh, you're talking about the HBO doc?
Yes.
Yes.
But she failed to bring up prior inconsistencies in their stories that really did compromise their stories. I don't know what happened.
I understand what you're saying.
So
okay,
I'm just saying, as a journalist, which she purports to be,
right,
it was a complete fail.
Right.
And then she committed the same failure with Meghan Markle,
yes,
where she didn't press any of her claims of racism in the royal family. And now we have the ultimate culmination of her journalistic fails.
While her protégés were selling questionable advice, Oprah was selling an image of herself as a woman of the people. But that image began to crumble under the weight of her own DMN fortune. The hypocrisy became impossible to ignore. Joe Rogan exploded when he saw her and Michelle Obama speaking at the DNC about income inequality. He pointed out the absurdity of billionaires standing on stage lecturing the public about people who took more than they needed. Oprah wasn't just rich. She was living in a different reality, on a palatial Montecito estate with one of the most beautiful mansions known to man. Megyn Kelly drove the point home, asking when was the last time Oprah actually spent time with a working-class person. The only inflation she understands is the markup on her Che-scented candles. The brand was about empathy, but the lifestyle was one of pure, uncut elitism.
Strength curation.
Oprah didn't help by sort of saying it's cheating. What do you mean it's cheating? It's a drug that helps people control their appetite. How is that cheating? So she was probably on the wrong side of things when she was saying that. And now I think she was sort of forced to admit, because as you say, it's obvious. Somebody like Oprah, who's constantly up and down with the weight and hasn't been on the skinnier side for a long time. And then suddenly, after this miracle drug comes out, like, we know. But she's still a spokesperson for Weight Watchers. And I guess she's going to still tell us that the point system is really what's behind the weight loss. When she first hit the scene in like the 1980s, and she was fresh out of Chicago, she was in Chicago for the launch of her national talk show. She was something electric and interesting and authentic, you know. I miss fat Oprah. She was just genuine. Now this thin Ozempic Oprah has lost, along with the pounds, her heart, her sense of authenticity. And what we're getting these days is this cleansed, elite, billionaire version who wants to scrub the record of facts.
Then came the pivot. Oprah's new era. Less book.
An empire of influence is one thing, but Oprah also branded herself as a world-class journalist, a seeker of truth. This is where her critics say her most shocking betrayals occurred. Her interview with Michael Jackson's accusers after the HBO documentary was labeled a dishonest piece of propaganda. She had the men right there and failed to ask them about glaring inconsistencies in their stories or the fact that they had multi-million-dollar lawsuits pending against Jackson's estate. It was a complete journalistic fail. Then she did it again with Meghan Markle, allowing her to make explosive claims of racism in the royal family without a single pushback or request for proof. Megyn Kelly called it a propaganda fest. Oprah wasn't hosting interviews. She was hosting coronations, using her platform to legitimize any narrative she favored. She wasn't a reporter. She was a propagandist. With her journalistic integrity in tatters, Oprah pivoted to her final form, a political kingmaker. She began endorsing political candidates, telling her millions of followers who they should vote for. But her reasoning was what truly horrified critics. She wasn't analyzing policy or experience. She was telling people who felt right in her spirit. Rogan was floored, asking if she chose senators the same way she chose throw pillows. This was the culmination of her entire brand. She had spent decades building an image of herself as a person with unparalleled intuition and moral authority, and now she was cashing in that influence to shape elections. It was a move many saw as a DMN-right dangerous abuse of power, proving her critics' worst fears about her intentions.